Very good. So, right, so that was glorious to hear from David there. And my only claim to fame that I was on the original pilot for that project that was about 22 years ago. So it's had some life with it. So what I'm going to talk about now is essentially this diagram we tend to use ourselves. Essentially, as you can see, it's a typical sort of triangle or pyramid model where we're using the idea of running your business, changing your business, or transforming your business. And that's a useful thing for people when they come to talk to eGain about what they want to do with knowledge in AI, is to look at, well, where are you now and what direction do you want to go in? So at this point on this diagram, there are some essentially things we would recommend and some technologies and so on. But over this next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to do a sort of slightly deep dive into this, thinking about it from the knowledge in an AI sense. So I'm going to start where a lot of our customers start prior to having a really formal knowledge base. So you can see from the diagram there, they'll have their customers. They won't really know too much about them. They won't know if it's Prince Charles or not. It's just a phone number comes in. They'll have a series of contacts they're trying to deal with. The agents essentially will have had some training. They'll have got various tools they can use. So they'll use a mixture of documents, websites, and so on to try and best as they can answer the call. And when it comes for as the management team, the operations team, to try and work out what's going on, principally at that stage, they've got call data. They know how many calls are taken. They maybe know the average handle time. But they don't know too much below that because, as was said earlier, you know, if you're using tick sheets to work out what your calls are about, that's not typically very accurate. And when it comes to trying to improve and optimize the system, it's really down to the hard work of training people, having people walking around, helping people who get into difficulties. So really quite hard. So when you look at the challenges and opportunities at this stage, as you're thinking about getting into the run part of it, you've got ineffective content. You really don't know what you've got necessarily. You don't know if it's up to date. You don't know who owns it. You haven't got very good information about what's being used, whether people like it. And, you know, essentially your agents can at any time be, you know, inconsistent, off script, non-compliant to processes. But one of the bigger challenges at this point is it's really hard to change things. Because to change it for the company, you've got to change each individual agent so that they know what they've got to do next time. And that's hard work. There are some good opportunities, though, because at this point in time, your business case is never better. And the way a lot of our clients do it is to say, let's look at some of our good agents, and let's look at what they do with contact deflection, transfers and callbacks, training and compliance and churn. And let's see, if I had a knowledge base, then I'd get more of my agents up to that level, and I can quantify what the deflection would be, what the reduction in return calls would be, and so on. The other thing you've got going at this stage is the agents are desperate. It's really tough when you've just got bits of paper and your old training notes, and you've got, you know, angry customers or busy customers trying to get an answer. So the agents are keen to buy into a system. And also you can break down the idea of these different silos, all the different bits of information where it's owned. So your first step on this journey then is to get to the run level, to get to where we're still basically treating all the customers as the same. We're still treating all the agents as the same, but we're maybe starting to automate some of the calls by deflecting it on the website, just with widgets or FAQs and so on. The agents have now got a single knowledge base. It's one place to go for everything they need. It may contain some big documents, some small ones, but it's where everything in it should be up to date and accurate and ready for use. And you've got some workflows where people are, whenever they make a change to the knowledge or content, it's gone through an approval process. So at this stage, you can start to look a little bit more on the analytics. You can look at what content is being used. You can look at what agents are using what content. So instead of just call variables, you can see this is my best agent, and he seems to use the knowledge base more than the others, that kind of stuff. And when it comes to optimizing, there's a ton of work you can do to make the content more readable and more useful. So the challenges at this stage, the biggest challenge on the whole journey, I think, is the first one, which is getting the transition from 0 to 1, to getting the transition from it's a wild west of documents and stuff to where everybody goes to the knowledge base and uses it. And the reason that's so difficult is because you need the user buy-in. And that little graph there in the bottom left is the curve we found over time is what happens. When you put something in, people are happy. It's better than the thing we had before. But that doesn't last more than 2 or 3 months. Soon after that, they're saying, yeah, it's not really up to date these days. I was hoping for a bit more. And if you're not careful, usage drops and just continues dropping until 10% of the users are using it, and that's it. So you've got no value. So you've really got to deal with that first 3 to 6 months where it's really driving on the agent feedback until the agents feel they own the tool. So that's the major challenge. But the opportunities at this stage are you can establish a knowledge base as the single place to go, both on the web and in the call center. That does a lot of stuff for your recruitment, training, induction, and so on. You've got a chance to really refresh all your content, as we heard earlier. You can really go through. You don't have to do it all at once. You can start off by creating some content and federating the rest, leaving it where it is and searching it using a search interface. And then over time, you find the stuff that's used and is useful, and you make it better. And you find the stuff that's not being used or isn't very useful, and you get rid of it. So over time, you've refreshed your content. And the other big thing at this level is you start to see which are the processes which are causing you problems. You start to see that for the next stage where you start to look at the process. So in the change level, what we find at this level, people are then starting to use much more of the AI-guided help. They're starting there to use their processes. And because they're using the processes with a step-by-step dynamic guidance, and because they're able to identify the customer and pass that customer data in, so we can now start to treat the customers slightly differently. If you've been a customer for 10 years, I can take you down the business logic for the process for an existing customer. If you just signed up yesterday, I can take you down that logic. So although the agents are still pretty much treated the same, I start to see the customers as different individuals. Not individuals, but okay, I can look at the amount you spend on various things. I can pre-answer questions, and I can tune the logic in a certain way. So I can start to give a slightly personalized experience there for the customers. I start to now at the analytics, the management level, that was a big change. Instead of looking at calls, instead of looking at agents or content, I'm now looking at the processes. I'm now looking at which process works well, which process works. And that's a huge change, as we heard earlier. Because once you start to look at your operations in terms of the processes, you can start to work out where you need to automate and augment. And the other thing you can do at the optimize is you can just bring in more and more data. So the length of the call gets shorter and shorter. And you can start to automate stuff on the website so that you can actually deflect more and more. So this, you're starting to see significant change happening. At this level, though, you're in a better rut, if I can use Rick's phrase there. The rut you're in is way better than where you started, but you still stand the risk of staying there. So at this level, as we've seen, you'll have a lot more stakeholders. You'll have the IT folks, the data people, the analytics people. So if you're not careful, it can slow down the rate of innovation of the system. It can be, and the guys who lose out there are typically the call center agents. They're still coming up with lots of good ideas, but there's far more people to say, hang on a minute, that might be difficult. So you're not necessarily getting the rate of change you were before. And if you're not careful, if you go down the route of trying to automate what the agent does rather than augment what the agent does, in other words, if you just expect the agent to click through stuff, you'll end up with a situation where we hear from some of our clients where they say, what's the best thing about the system? The best thing is I don't have to think at all. What's the worst thing about the system? I don't have to think at all. Okay? And you really need to get the value out of that. So the opportunities, you can really drill into the self-service. For things that can be automated where customers want to do it, because you've now got processes in place, and because those processes are proven and tested, you can give them straight out to the customer. And because, as we heard earlier, because you're all using a process, you can stop it, and the next agent can pick it up at exactly the same place. So you can pause and resume over processes if need be, without having to go back to the start again. And then you can really start to drill down. If the last 5 steps are all stuff on a system, you can look at robotic process automation, RPA, and start really carving big chunks off the handle time. And you can get to the point where any agent can take any call. If they know how to use the system, then you're in good shape. So then looking here then at the next level is really how do you go about transforming. So in this case, the difference here is to really get to those kind of authentic. Previous case, I've got consistent use. Level 2, I'm getting compliant usage. They're all following the right process. But how do I get to the experience? How do I get to an authentic, personal, emotional experience, if that's what you want? And you get that when the agent has got the time to and is treated differently. So at the change level, we started treating the customers differently, using all the customer data to tune the business logic through the guided help. At this level, we have to think about that the agents can take a different route. If I'm a really experienced agent, if I've done this for 10 years, then I can just give you a couple of checklists and leave you to get on with it, because I'm confident that you can be trusted to be autonomous within a certain area. If you're brand new, or if the process just changed yesterday, I might want everybody to follow through the same process. So you're trying to get to the point where the simple guided process has been customized and personalized for both the customer. All of their customer data is coming into it and driving it, but also we're now trying to drive the process based on the agent skills. They may have been there for 10 years, but they may have just moved into a brand new team. So although they're experienced in some things, we want them to go through the long-winded process, the step-by-step for certain things, because they're new. So the system is now looking a bit more like a sat-nav. In other words, you type in where you want to go, you look at any conditions you've got, you configure it, and then you've still got to drive the car. It's not a self-drive car. You're responsible for steering that personal conversation with the customer through the route you want it to go, based on coming up with a really good experience, for the customer. But the sat-nav is taking you through all the process steps and making you sure, And the other thing we can do at this level is we can change the logic depending on the operations. If there's a huge queue, then we can say, okay, let's just cut this, try this, and call me back. If I've got bags of time, I can talk about all the things you might call about in your next couple of calls. But we can tune that minute by minute based on the data that we pull into the system at the start of each call. So here at the management level, I'm looking at process outcomes. I'm looking at the actual customer experience. And from what we've seen in various places, to really move up a couple of notches on the customer experience, it's basically hiring people who are passionate about the experience. Now, most people these days say, well, I can either get somebody who can understand these 900 processes, or I can get someone who can be really nice on the phone, but I can't find somebody who does both. So they opt for the people who can follow the process, whereas if the system takes over that guidance, then you can go back to looking for that. So at this stage, we're trying to allow agents to be slightly more individual, to fall in line with what the customer wants for their experience. And the other thing you're trying to do at this stage is, let's face it, you've maybe got 1,000 agents who are highly skilled, and they are day by day talking through complex issues with their customers. So you've got an enormously rich source of information about how to improve the experience itself. So you really want to start to measure the success of the system by the amount of engagement you've got from your agents, by the amount of new suggestions and content changes they're making. So you can do process innovation, you can do agent automation. So at this stage, rounding up it as it were, the challenges are when you get to this level, you can't function without that system there. It becomes mission critical. So, you need to put things in place so that you're able to ensure that it's 100% resilient. The other thing that's difficult is, again, you're in yet a better rut, but to be a leader, as in Rick's stuff, you've really got to maintain the obsession. Can we make it more useful and a better experience? And as I think we heard earlier, the rate of change for the experience for the agents needs to be faster. Agents, it's not uncommon to hear people saying, I can't get the agents to use a CRM tool. I've heard it on a number of calls this year. Agents are just not prepared to put up with stuff that is really bad these days, and that's a big challenge. So you need to be getting them to be getting involved. So the opportunities, you can give a framework within each agent can be a brand ambassador. You've got autonomy so they can make their own judgments. And then you can engage the really high performers in how can we make this process better, which is where you want to get. That ensures that you don't level off. You don't just plateau at the level you're at. So finally then, this is the summarization of that. If we look at the run, change, transform. At the run level, my contact execution goes from inconsistent, non-compliant, and potentially off script. As I get through using the knowledge and some process, I can get consistency, compliance, and on brand. But where I really want to get to is, the fact that agents are actually doing the right thing, not just doing the thing the system says. They've got autonomy to act within that, and it can be personal for the agent and personal for the customer. So that we end up with the good experiences and motivated agents, so the AX and the CX, and a known framework for the business, the BX. So looking at that and putting it together, I would say it's not something you can just jump from zero to that transformation bit. It really it's looking like a series of, maybe a 3-year program, because it's not easy to make these steps, in just a few months. So it may be that this might be a template for anybody who's starting in the system, find the level you're at, work out the number of phases to go. Anyway, thanks very much for your time. I'll leave it there.